It's our electric vehicle showdown.
We're looking at the vehicles that we have driven recently and talking about the highs and lows in different categories. So which vehicles have we driven recently? Let's go through the list and tell you a little bit about each. What's up first?
The Chevy Bolt. The Bolt has a 66 kilowatt-hour battery with 200 horsepower and 266 pound-feet of torque. It gets 417 kilometers, 259 miles of EV range, and it's front-wheel drive only.
The most attractive thing about the Bolt is the starting price in Canada is just over $38,000, $31,000 in the US. So let's go through the high and low points of each vehicle. What does the Bolt have going for it?
Well, the Volt is a great vehicle. It offers a smooth ride. I mean, Zach, you and I are a big fan of it. The only problem with it is that there were a lot of recalls. We put out our video that week on the Chevy Bolt and the battery started catching fire. This has been a problem for GM.
So GM is focusing on hopefully fixing all of the existing vehicles in the marketplace before they start up production again. In February, the date is now pushed back to February. The good news is hopefully that'll all be fixed and people will be able to get these cars because we think it really does a fantastic job as a little city urban runabout. For the price, it really is kind of hard to beat if it doesn't catch fire.
Now, it's only a front-wheel drive option, but in some parts of the US and in Canada, it might work fine with a great set of winter tires, or if you live in a place like Florida or California.
This video is brought to you by Canada Drives. Shop online for your next used vehicle and enjoy the convenience of to-your-door delivery and the confidence of a 7-day love it or return it guarantee. Visit CanadaDrives.ca to learn more. The next vehicle on our list, we're going alphabetically by the way, is the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Let's find out more about this.
The entry-level Ioniq 5 standard range comes with a smaller 58 kilowatt-hour battery and rear-wheel drive only. It has 168 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque with 354 kilometers, 220 miles of EV range.
There is a rear-wheel drive long range with a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery, 225 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, but it offers 488 kilometers or 303 miles of range.
And finally, the all-wheel drive long-range model. It has the most power and the larger battery, 320 horsepower and 446 pound-feet of torque. It gets 414 kilometers, 256 miles of EV range.
So the base rear-wheel drive model starts at just under $45,000 Canadian, just under $40,000 US.
The base all-wheel drive long-range model is just under $55,000 Canadian and just over $47,000 US.
All right, some high and low points of the Ioniq.
Well, obviously, it has a wonderful drive to it. It's really smooth, and I love the regenerative braking where you can control it with paddle shifters at the steering wheel.
Doesn't have a lot of ground clearance. It really sits quite low. A lot of people argue it's not a crossover, it's really just a hatchback. It is long though, so I guess it does kind of fall into the crossover category. That's really one of the only downsides on this one.
But I like the range on it. I like the charging capacity of it. All around, it's a great EV.
The next one is the Mazda, for Americans, that's a Mazda MX30. Let's get into the stats.
The MX30 has a 35.5 kilowatt-hour battery with 143 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque. It gets up to 161 kilometers, 100 miles of EV range, front-wheel drive only.
The starting price in Canada is just over $42,000. In the United States, it's just $33,500.
The top trim is just over $47,000 Canadian, and the top trim in the US is $36,500.
All right, things we like and don't like about this one. One of them's pretty obvious, Andrew. You want to start with the dislike first?
Yeah, well, there's two things. Okay, the range, obviously. Like, are we back in the time when the Leaf came out? Come on, Mazda. And also, only a front-wheel drive option.
And also, the rear doors are kind of weird. What we do like about it, though, beautiful interior.
Yeah.
And you know what? It drives pretty well.
Yeah, it drives really well. I think that is the shining star when it comes to the drive because you know what? It kind of feels a bit like a gas model.
The next one, some controversy around the name, is the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Let's get into the specs.
The Mustang Mach-E has both rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive options, standard range and extended range. Standard range models have a 68 kilowatt-hour battery. The rear-wheel drive model has 266 horsepower, 355 kilometers, 230 miles of EV range. All-wheel drive models have 325 kilometers, 210 miles of EV range.
The extended range models get a larger battery, 88 kilowatt hour battery, and the rear wheel drive models have 290 horsepower, but 475 kilometers or 300 miles of EV range. If you get the larger battery with all-wheel drive, the power goes up to 346 horsepower and the range is 425 kilometers or 277 miles.
With the MachE, you have to pay for all the extras. If you want all-wheel drive, it'll cost you $3,500 Canadian, $2,700 US, and the extended range is $7,000 Canadian, $5,000 US. You cannot get the extended range on the base model.
The base model in Canada is $50,500. That's just under $43,000 US.
And it goes all the way up with the GT Performance Edition for just under $83,000 Canadian or just under $60,000 US.
All right, let's get into the things we like and the things we dislike. I think I like the look of it.
Oh, it looks beautiful. I think it's one of the best looking EVs out there.
Now the dislike, the name is really controversial, but
Yeah.
I think that's kind of past now that it's been out for a while. People are just kind of getting used to it.
And I also think they needed to promote this MachE, and they thought, hey, let's throw the Mustang name into it. And guess what? It got a lot of publicity because of it.
Yeah, so the F-150 is the most recognized nameplate for Ford. Number 2 is Mustang. They went with Mustang. Now, I do have a complaint about the suspension. It's the rebound rate of the shock absorbers. Big, heavy battery.
Yeah.
The shock absorbers and the springs compress, and then when they rebound, the back end can buck around. I noticed it right away, and it's all I could think about. You didn't mind it, though.
I actually liked it, and I applaud Ford for coming out with a vehicle with this type of suspension, especially with the Mustang name attached. I think that if you live in Quebec or in areas where you have some pretty rough roads, it's not going to give you that smooth ride that you're looking for in an EV.
But I think
it's quite unique.
I think actually it does give a smooth, but that's why they're doing it, to smooth out the bumps. I don't know. It's a calibration of the suspension I don't like, and I couldn't get my head around it, to be
Zach
honest.
didn't like a lot of things about the Mustang MachE, even the air vents making his fingers cold. So it's not a favorite of Zach.
Full disclosure, we own 2 Porsches, so we're kind of fans of the brand. Next up is the Taycan. Let's get into the stats.
The Taycan's power comes from a 93 kilowatt hour battery with 522 to 750 horsepower and 479 to 774 pound-feet of torque depending on the trim. It offers 325 to 400 kilometers of EV range with standard all-wheel drive.
Put your seatbelt on. Here comes the price. The 4S starts at just under $120,000 Canadian or $104,000 US. The top Taycan Turbo S is $214,000 in Canada, $185,000 in the US. Well, what do we like and dislike about this? There's a lot to like.
There's mostly, I think, we like. I mean, what's there not to like? Drives like a typical EV, smooth, but oh, so quick. We did launch control, and take a look at this.
You can feel it trying to get
Woohoo!
The other thing is you're getting Porsche build quality on the inside. It really is expensive, but you kind of feel like you're getting that on the inside. On the downside, Andrea, 2 things. The back seat is really small, considering this is a fairly large car. And then the suspension, the air suspension, you didn't love it.
Yeah, it kind of made me feel a little bit nauseous. I don't know if it was because it's just so smooth or so fast, but by the end of the day, I felt a little bit sick. And also our son, who was almost 6'2", I drove him to work in it. He didn't seem that impressed by it. He found that the front seat was quite uncomfortable and he didn't have enough space. What?
It's not that big. Next is the best-selling electric car in North America, the Tesla Model Y. Let's get into the specs.
The Model Y all-wheel drive has a 75 kilowatt-hour battery. The long-range model has 384 horsepower and 531 kilometers, 318 miles of EV range.
If you get the performance model, the power is 450 horsepower, 488 kilometers or 303 miles of EV range.
The long range starts at just under 77,000 Canadian or 61,000 US.
The performance model is just over $85,000 Canadian and just under $64,000 US.
The best thing about the Model Y is the EV range, the power, and the charging infrastructure, and of course, let's not forget about all that technology.
On the downside, the interior materials are really not up to the price tag. The ride is not adaptive for the price they're charging for this vehicle.
Yeah.
If you compare it to internal combustion engines, I know you people hate when we do that, but when you do compare it at that same price point, you're getting fully adaptive suspensions, and it isn't available in the Model Y.
And after getting in the IONIQ 5, we had just reviewed the Model Y. The difference in fit and finish of the interior is really noticeable.
Now we're almost done with our list. At the end, we're getting into our category showdown. Next up is the Volkswagen ID4.
The ID4 has an 82 kilowatt hour battery. The rear wheel drive model has 201 horsepower and 400 kilometers, 260 miles of EV range.
When you add the dual motor all-wheel drive, you get 302 horsepower. You don't lose much range. 386 kilometers, 249 miles.
The base rear-wheel drive model starts at just under 45,000 Canadian and just under 41,000 US. The base all-wheel drive model is just under 50,000 Canadian and 44,500 US.
The top all-wheel drive trim in Canada is just under $58,000 and just over $50,000 in the US.
One of my favorite things about the ID4 is the way it looks.
It looks like a conventional SUV. This could easily be the new Tiguan, for example, but no, it's electrified. So people who are migrating from, say, a Tiguan into this, it's familiar.
It is, and I also like the price point. That all-wheel drive model starting at just under $50,000 Canadian is a great price point. There's a lot of value there. If you didn't want to get those extra features, there's an $8,000 package in Canada that you can add on. I think you'd be fine with the one under $50,000.
Next is an electric vehicle that can easily be mistaken for its gas sibling, the XC40 Recharge.
It has a 78 kilowatt hour battery with 402 horsepower and 486 pound-feet of torque. It gets about 359 kilometers, 223 miles of EV range. Volvo has just increased the range in its new model.
And Volvo has also adjusted the starting price by about $5,000. It now starts at just under $60,000 Canadian and just over $55,000 US.
If you want to get a vehicle that is as close to a gas model as it gets, you've got to get this Recharge.
It has the exact same kind of look on the outside and the inside. The only difference really on the outside is the grille is slightly different and you get a frunk, which is kind of cool, but the inside is exactly the same and you give up nothing when it comes to space.
I think it was really smart that Volvo reduced the price on this. I wonder if it just wasn't selling very well. It was priced much too high at $65,000 Canadian, so it's nice to see.
So those are the electric vehicles we've driven recently. Now we get into the showdown. Let's start with best range.
Well, that goes to the Model Y. The Tesla Model Y all-wheel drive long range with 531 kilometers, 318 miles.
Just want to clarify, these are the vehicles we've driven.
Yeah.
The Model S Plaid we have not driven yet. So the next category is most powerful.
So we broke it down in first, second, and third because it's pretty obvious that the Taycan is going to win with up to 750 horsepower. Second goes to the Model Y Performance with 450 horsepower. And third is the Volvo XC40 Recharge with 402 horsepower.
So you probably noticed when we went through the prices of each of these, they're expensive. There's one exception, that's the Bolt at $38,000. So people are looking for rebates. It's actually easier to go through the vehicles that don't qualify for rebates.
The Taycan, Model Y, and XC40 Recharge do not qualify for the federal EV rebates in Canada. However, in the US, the XC40 Recharge and Taycan do qualify for the tax credit up to $7,500 US.
So our final category is best value. Now, we're not just going strictly on price. We're going on a combination of features, range, size, and all of that kind of stuff. So what's the first pick?
Well, the all-wheel drive ID4 is priced really well at just under $50,000. With the federal rebate as well as some provincial rebates that you might qualify for, you could really get that price down to make it a little bit more affordable.
Plus, it's a size of vehicle that people like, and that's what most people buy are compact SUVs. It has better ground clearance than, say, the IONIQ 5, and it has a useful back seat and cargo area. It's actually a well-designed product, and I think for the money, it might be the one to beat. What's next?
The Chevy Bolt. Yes, it only offers a front-wheel drive option, but if you want to get into the EV market in Canada, you can get one for just over $38,000, and in the US, just over $31,000. This is a great price point.
And over 400 kilometers of EV range. It's a real snappy, it's a great little fun car to drive in the city. Every time I drive one, I go, this is so much fun. It's zippy, you can park it anywhere. The downside, the recalls, as we talked about. Hopefully General Motors will get through this and come out the other side. And the other one is General Motors has some new electric vehicles they're going to be announcing over the next few years.
Yeah.
I really hope that they're going to keep this price strategy where they're focused on price, because that's really what's going to get people into electric cars. Right now, this is the best value.
And to wrap things up, another great one is the IONIQ 5. It offers a lot of value. That all-wheel drive model starts at just under $55,000 Canadian and just over $47,000 US.
Now, we didn't put the Model Y on there because in Canada, the starting price is $77,000. That's luxury car territory. We're looking for value here. And yes, it is the best seller, but it's obviously appealing to people who would probably be buying a Mercedes, an Audi, or something like that. And they're getting a Tesla.
In the US, the pricing is much closer for the Tesla Model Y and the IONIQ 5. And if you consider Tesla to be a luxury brand, you might make that stretch an extra $3,000 US to buy the Model Y.
All right, so there is our showdown. Hopefully you liked it, got some information. We're hoping to get more electric cars. Our big struggle where we are is actually getting our hands on them. It's a struggle for everybody. There's limited supply, and there's certainly demand out there. So as soon as we get our hands on one, we will cover it.
We are looking forward to all these new vehicles coming our way. The Kia EV6 is a big one, should come out in the spring. Genesis has a great plan in place, as does Cadillac.
Yeah, there's lots coming, so we're going to be busy. All right, if you want to follow along on Instagram, it's Motormouth_Andrea. She's much busier on Instagram than me. And if you want to do what, Andrea? What's the next thing?
Well, you got to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified when all of our reviews drop. We put out a lot of content each week. This video is brought to you by Canada Drives. Shop online for your next used vehicle and enjoy the convenience of to-your-door delivery and the confidence of a 7-day love it or return it guarantee. Visit CanadaDrives.ca to learn more.